can't get it figured out.
Turn up the drive and concentrate. You'll get it figured out. 97.1 FM, the drive she got it.
What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to another water hopping episode. Before we get into today's video, if you haven't already, please do me a favor and hit that like button for me. Subscribe to the channel for more content, possibly more like this. Lots of fishing and lots of other goodies that you guys could expect on the channel. Drop a comment below, by the way, on what is your, let's pick, let's not, 5 is a little too broad for you folks at home. I'm just gonna ask you guys for, just tell me your #1 staple in the spring. Just drop a comment below what you guys love to throw in the spring. I'm super curious. Basically, today's video is gonna be all about my top 5 spring bass fishing lures. So come along, stick around, and I gotta get these rods re-tied up. We're coming to you live from the bed of the Tacoma, and get re-rigged up here. Got some tackle right there. We're gonna re-rig, but the good news is, it's 68 degrees and we have a Samuel Adams summer ale by our side. These are still, on a serious note, these are still the COVID home vlogs. So on a serious note, be safe, people, be practicing your social distancing, and let's get all of us back on track. Basically, the only way we can do that is by following the rules and following the guidelines that have been laid out in front of us, and just, we'll come around the mountain, guys. Just have some patience. We also have a Leinenkugel cranberry ginger shanty right there. Let's start rigging these up, shall we? Let's speed this up though, so you guys don't have to wait and wonder what I'm gonna choose. So basically, let's just go like this. It's already time to clean out the day box. It's been like 3 days. Okay. Almost forgot. Gotta go get that Amazon package that we just got. I don't think I can pick this up with one hand. Yep. I don't even know what this is. I got multiple shipments coming to me. Ha ha ha. Heh. Got this right here. It's a little sneak peek, I guess you could say, at some of my plans for the upcoming future. Things involving the truck, not completely, but kinda sorta. Long story short, yeah, we're turning this into like a one-man / convertible to 2 people camping, fishing machine, pretty much. And this is one of the cogs in the wheel. Got myself a deluxe 24-piece enamel tableware set. Got, let's see what it says. Set of 4 stainless steel spoons, knives, and forks, 4 10 1/4 inch plates, 4 6-inch bowls, and 4 12-ounce mugs. Basically, this is going to be the, I guess you guys get it. This is the kitchen for keeping in the truck. We got a bunch of other things on the way. Anyways, what you guys came for is my top 5 spring bass lures. So we just got them all tied on. We're going to start going through them now. Stay tuned. In no particular order, we're going to start going through the top 5 spring bass fishing lures I choose to fish here in the Midwest. First rod we're picking up right here. This is my 7'3" Omen Black. This is a 13 fishing rod paired with a 13 fishing Inception reel. This right here is actually a super famous lure, and it's one of the more expensive ones, I will say that. This is a Livingston LV500. Look up on Tackle Warehouse and try to put it at the bottom of the screen for you guys to make it a little more specific for you. I'm also going to try to link all 5 of these lures in the description. This lure right here is an absolute all-star. There's more than one reason for it. One of the reasons It's got a absolute awesome knock to it. The rattles inside of this lure are phenomenal. The sound it makes when it's under the water is absolutely brilliant. If you're looking for consistency when you're out fishing and you want a lure that's gonna work the same for you every single time, it's gonna run straight every single time. You know how it feels in the water. It has a nice tight wobble. That's another great thing for spring. That water hasn't really quite warmed up yet. So with that in mind, a tight wobble is great. That knock, that rattle, and the sight of that right there, the reason red is key in the spring is because in the spring, bass are munching on crawfish. If you ever catch a bass in the spring and you look at their lips, you might notice that their lips have a red coating. That's not by accident or chance or just something in the water. That's because the bass are eating crawfish at that time, or some sort of crustacean that's in the rocks, things like that. Red crawfish in the spring. So if you guys are gonna be fishing riprap, you're gonna be wanting to tie one of these on, especially if the wind's blowing in your face, you got some clouds in the sky, and it's early spring. Moving on to number 2. Ooh boy, like I said, no particular order, but this is one of my favorites, folks. Lure of choice is this S-Waver 168 slow sinking, and my goodness, guys, if you have never thrown a glide bait in the spring, you're missing out. Go find, this is another one of those lures. I guess I'm starting off with 2 of the more expensive lures, but I promise you as we go onto these last 3 here, these last 3 are total budget lures. Right now, it is my only one, so hope I don't lose it. S-Waver 168. Now, why do you throw an S-Waver in the spring? Basically, why do you throw a glide bait in the spring? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, bass in the spring tend to be grouping up. Even if they're small bass, big bass, they tend to be grouping up, or the big bass tend to be staging off on the drop-offs. Why glide baits shine is because of, for one, they're absolutely brilliant in the water. If you've never casted a glide bait in the water, you should do yourself a favor and either find a buddy who owns one and just go look at it in the water, or go buy one yourself. It's not gonna be something that gets just hammered all the time, but let me tell you, when the time is right, the best situational fishing that I've had with this lure has been early spring, cloudy skies, a little bit of wind. There's gotta be a little chop on the water in my experience. Clearer water, the better. You'll notice on a steady retrieve, an S-Waver works like this towards you. But when you stop it, it wants to turn all the way around. I can't even do it with my wrist, obviously, but the S-Waver will completely do a 180 when you stop it, especially if you give it a little pop of the rod. The whole lure will go whew. And that right there is one of the absolute magic things about this lure, because that stop and that pop, I guess you could say, is the main reason, the main time that you get, or I have gotten most of my bite. And what's happening is there's a bass sitting right behind it, or whatever is following it, and he's just keying in on it, but nothing key is happening that's making him think it's time to strike. And then all of a sudden, the lure stops. Bass is right behind it, and then whew, all of a sudden, there's a bait fish facing a bass directly in the face. At that point, it becomes nature and it becomes reaction. If there's a fish that's been following it, 9 times out of 10, they're gonna hammer it at that moment. Moving on to number 3. First, we need a sip. Oh, yeah. So this right here is my one and only 2-piece rod. And the story behind that, oh, look at that, we're actually a little skewed. Story behind that, folks, is I actually bought this rod not knowing it was a 2-piece rod. Yes, I am not too proud to admit it. Bought this rod not knowing it was a 2-piece rod. I picked it up in Bass Pro. It's actually the only rod I own that I bought in store. Every other rod I have right here, I bought online through Tackle Warehouse. It had medium light action, so this is what I call my fairy wand. You guys might have heard that term thrown around in the industry. So what we have tied on to this medium light is right here. A GamaKatsu Wicked Wacky weedless hook. The reason I absolutely love this hook, for one, is it's GamaKatsu. Pretty much everything GamaKatsu comes out with is just A1 quality. You will pay a little bit more for it, but in the long run, these hooks are just absolutely phenomenal. I hardly ever have fish jump off or shake off, anything like that. And I had to catch a bass from like 25 feet beneath me. So you never really know. And it was on this, it was actually, yeah, it was on this hook. The actual lure though that I have on here is a BioSpawn ExoStick BamaBug. 5-inch BioSpawn ExoStick in BamaBug. This pretty much, if you want to If you haven't skipped ever, if you guys don't know what skipping is, basically the action of skipping is just taking an underhand swing cast and you go tick, 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 tick. Basically, if you've ever picked up a rock and skipping stones in the lake or whatever growing up as a kid, it's the same premise. The idea is you want to pick up, someone's got a big motor on the road, you want to pick up this when you're ever trying to skip tight underneath things. Basically dock skipping, if you've got some low-hanging brush or things of that nature. Where do I throw this in the spring? Well, I already covered that. I'll talk about docks. Big thing for me is docks. The bigger thing for me though is the shadows. If you guys have ever heard Tactical Bassin, Matt Allen and Tim Little talk about fishing, one of the big things they talk about a lot of the times is the shadows and getting into the deepest parts that a lot of people don't get to. A lot of people pull up to a dock and they make casts at the outer pylons because they can't get in there. The reason they can't get in there is they don't know how to skip. Do yourselves a favor, learn how to skip. As for when will I fish this, I throw this all the time. Pretty much plain and simple, folks. Muddy water, clean water, deep water, shallow water. Deep water kind of sucks because it takes forever to sink, but I have caught fish in 20 feet of water on a weightless Wacky rig. Just took me like 3 minutes to make it happen. The main place this shines though is shallow. Shallow, docks, brush, things like that. Pay attention. On the sink, watch your line. You're watching that bow in your line as it sinks. You're paying attention to see if you see a pop in the line. So the whole time this is a visual game. You want to watch your line as that lure sinks down into the water. And once it sinks down into the water, you'll see it go toop, and you'll know that you've hit bottom. At that point, you can start working it back towards you, however you want to work it for that day. That's it for the Wacky rig. Number 3, medium light Wacky rig. If you guys have never thrown a Wacky rig, dirt cheap, catches all the fish in the pond or the lake. Right here we got my, what do we have here anyways? Lure number 4. That right there, my friends, is a 1/2 ounce Dirty Jigs swim jig. I cannot remember the color and it's absolutely killing me. I think it's called Sungill. Places I would love to throw this right here. Now, clear water, definitely, but there are some scenarios I'll pick this up in some chalkier water. A lot of times I'll do that if it's a little shallower, because in my eyes, if the water's only 2 feet deep and this is running through the channel, if it's coming anywhere near a bass, they're either gonna sense it being there or they're gonna feel it. It's a little different if you're working with 12, 15 feet of water and you're casting this out there, because the bass could be way down in the chalky water. He's not gonna have a clue that this is rolling through. The swim jig I pick up generally in clear water instances. Also on tends to be calmer days, I find that the swim jig really seems to shine when it's given a chance to be seen. Another key thing when you're working a swim jig is getting that skirt to flow. Matt Allen from Tactical Bassin, I already referenced them. He's big on talking about secondary action, and that's one of the things that a swim jig has. You have the tail kick. I'll show you guys. You have the tail kick, obviously. But you guys can see as I'm kicking that tail, what else is happening? That skirt, it works way better in the water, but that skirt on that jig is flailing around at the same time. So when you're popping that lure as it's coming back to you, you're making that skirt puff, puff, flare, puff, puff. Cast them anywhere. Cast them up in the brush, cast them into grass, cast them into a plain, rocky, sandy bottom, cast them in open water. When the conditions start getting crazier and rougher and the water starts getting dirtier, I tend to go over to my number 5. So that leads us into my number 5. Let's get into it. All right, I know I said in no particular order, but I gotta say, I think this is gonna be my number 1, guys. Right here, everyone's got a workhorse, right? Everyone's got their combo that is just there. Pick it up and you can just throw it all day long because of how good it feels in your hand. Regardless of the fishing result and what you're actually coming up with, results-wise, everyone has a combo they can pick up and they can fish all day long. This is mine. This is a 7'3" medium-heavy Veritas 2.0 paired up with a 13 fishing Inception reel and an 8-to-1 gear ratio. The line that I have spooled onto here is 20-pound. Oh, it's braid, but what is it? I want to say it's sniper line. It's the green Viz. Right here. That, my friends, is a 1/2 ounce Z-Man custom chatterbait. There's nothing that I pick up when it comes to moving baits that I have more confidence in than a chatterbait. I once caught 20 fish back to 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 back in like an hour, cast after cast. It was just the same cast. I must have fired up a school or something. One great thing about chatterbait fishing is when you cast it out there, you can feel it in the rod. It's like an active way of fishing. A chatterbait, as it's working along, has this blade right here that's ticking along and shaking in the water as it comes back to you, and you can feel it in your rod. I always like to keep, see, I'm not even fishing right now. I always like to keep a finger on the blank, and that helps you feel what's happening in the water a little bit better. If you ever do that on your rod, you can feel it in this finger, and that's because all the sensitivity travels through the blank and you can feel the bite. So when you're churning the reel and working the chatterbait back towards you, you can feel in the rod. One way I love to fish chatterbaits, the main way I fish them, is basically what I call ripping. I'll cast it a mile. I love to cast these things super far out. I love to cast them into grass. Basically, I'll tell you guys, that's my favorite scenario to throw a chatterbait, is grass that you can get through. Not like the thickest grass you guys have ever seen in your lives. I'm not talking like chalky Okeechobee grass. I'm talking grass you guys can get through and work through. There's nothing that really shines quite like a chatterbait. And as you're working it back towards you, you pretty much use a steady retrieve, except I like to do, you know, pick it up every now and again. You're just varying the retrieve. Same scenarios I was talking about earlier. If you have a fish following you and you do the rip, it's kind of the opposite. With the S-Waver, you stop it and the lure turns around and faces the fish. This one, however, when you do the rip, you're speeding it up, and it's making the fish that's following it think that this lure is gonna get away. This bait fish, this prey is gonna get away. So you give it that rip, you free up that grass, and you keep moving through the water faster, and you go back to your cadence. I have gotten so many bites right on the rip or right after I give it the rip. Usually I do 2 rips, it's just kind of my flow. I'll mix it up and do 3 and do 1, but that's kind of the main way I like to fish a chatterbait. And I guess with that, we'll close it out. I'm gonna say, where will I pick up a chatterbait? If it's spring, if it's summer, if it's fall, I'm gonna pick up chatterbait. I freaking love chatterbait fishing, and they flat out catch fish. I am gonna close out this video. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you did enjoy the video, please do me a favor. Let me know your feedback. Hit that like button for me. And as always, guys, keep water hopping, and I'll see you soon. It's time to go slay some big old greenfish, folks.